the University of Arizona Bio5 Institute, we bring together hundreds of multifaceted experts that include world-class bioscientists, engineers, physicians, and computational researchers. This team science approach is designed to ignite creative solutions to the many complex biological challenges facing our families and communities, and has resulted in disease prevention strategies, promising new therapies, innovative diagnostics and devices, and improved food sustainability.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Science Talks, a conversation hosted by the University of Arizona's Bio5 Institute. I'm your host, Dr. Brittany Ulorn. Microscopic organisms were the earliest forms of life on Earth, and to this day, it's estimated there are more than 1 trillion species of microbes that inhabit our soil, water, and air. These tiny organisms were essential to establishing larger, more complex life forms, and they continue to make the planet livable for you and me today. Today, we are joined by self-proclaimed microbe hunter, Dr. Paul Carini. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Of course. So I read on your website that you found your way to microbiology after realizing you weren't going to be a race car driver. So tell us more about how you wound up in science.
Well, I still want to be a race car driver. I just don't think it's going to happen. But I've always been interested in science. So I have like a Dr. Seuss book from when I was maybe 6. I think it's called About Me or something like that, All About Me. And in there's a page that says, when I grow up, I want to be. And I had written in crayon at the age of 6, a scientist, complete with the misspelling of scientist and all. And I have a photo that my mom still cherishes, of course she does, of me holding a junior microscope as, again, like a 7-year-old or something. So I've always had this urge and desire to do science. We grew up next to a field that was next to a tavern. And the patrons of the tavern would eat chicken wings, and the bones would make their way into this field and be buried. Of course, I would dig them up, right? Because I went over with my little shovel and think they're dinosaur bones. Yeah, and I think they're dinosaur bones. Like, Ma, I found this bone. And she, of course, was not thrilled with that. So I've always had this urge. Fast forward to my teen years, that transition to racing. I really loved auto racing. I remember the first time I saw a race car. And I wanted to be a driver, but I also had this real interest in designing the actual race cars. So as a 12-year-old, I'd go to the library and check out books on fluid aerodynamics and try to teach myself calculus from old high school books of my dad's or something like that. And then I went to college. Oh, actually, no, there was a big thing. So the microbiology twist happened when I was 15. I was on the cross-country team and we were playing a game of pickup football, and I ended up tearing my ACL, my anterior cruciate ligament in my knee, and a lot of cartilage damage with that. So I spent a lot of time over the next 3 to 4 years with physical therapists. And when I decided to go to college, I said, well, hey, I want to be a physical therapist. I didn't understand. I'm a first generation college student, so I didn't really understand what a master's degree was, and that physical therapy was a master's degree. So I had to pick an undergraduate major, and my advisor at the time recommended microbiology. There was a little bit of turmoil in there, and I remember the first class where I really thought, oh, I could do microbiology forever was a class called Cellular Evolution. As an undergrad, I was probably about a junior or thereabouts. And my 2B master's advisor was teaching that class, Chuck Wimpy. And the class my mind exploded in that class with all these cool ideas and all this stuff that was unknown about how microbes evolve, how they survive in these really hostile environments, the origins of life, the origins of eukaryotic cells, like you and I are made out of. So it was at that moment that I decided, hey, I want to do this. Racing can be a hobby, or it can be an interest on the side. And from here on out, I'm going to pursue microbiology. And really, that's what it ended up being. That was sort of the pivoting point for me.
That is quite an incredible story, from digging up chicken bones to cross country and tearing your ACL, and all the way through finding your love for microbiology in college. And I think I can relate to your early childhood a lot. My mom recently dug up something that I think I did in first grade, and it's, tell us about what you want to be when you grow up. And I wrote scientist, and I even wrote that I was going to have my PhD. And I just remember digging up things in my backyard. And, it's amazing to see that the little minds and the little creators that we were back then, what we become when we do grow up and get our chance to follow our passions.
Yeah.
Wow.
So cool.
Yeah, I know. It is really cool. So I want to talk a bit about what you do today and your lab's research. So I know that you all are interested in deciphering how microbes make Earth habitable for humans. So tell us a bit more about your research and how these microorganisms are important to supporting our lives.
Yeah, so microbes really, it's easier to tell people about what they don't affect because it's a much shorter list. So if we start with just our bodies, microbes are on us, they're in us, they help keep us healthy. The vast majority of them help keep us healthy. And there's no way you can scrub enough to get them off in the morning or, any other sort of newfangled way to cleanse yourself, if you will. They're there with us and they help keep us healthy. They also cause disease, but that's a very small portion of them. And that's been the traditional focus, of course, of microbiology. That's why there are all these disinfectants you can buy and so on and so forth. To be honest with you, scientists are really just beginning to understand all the ways that microbes benefit us as in terms of health. There's a lot of hype around this. If you just type in, healthy microbiome, there will be a lot of articles about that. And the reality is we don't really know what a healthy microbiome is right now. But there's a lot of potential, and a potential that if we can somehow microbes that live with us, we can influence our health, maybe influence how long we live and how healthy be healthier for longer periods of our life. If we kind of go outside of our body, we have our built environment, and there are microbes all over where we live and work. There are microbes in our bathrooms, in our showers, in our toilets. There are microbes on our counters. There are microbes in the air we breathe and in the heating ventilation that we breathe through. Some people associate with the sort of allergen side of things, but there's the potential that these microbes could also influence our health in beneficial ways. So there's a lot of research going into developing developing workspaces to expose us to healthy sets or healthier, more diverse sets of microbes. Those microbes usually come from outside the soil, where they're released as part of their natural ecology. So soils are the most microbe-dense places I shouldn't say microbe-dense, but there are probably more soil microbes than there are anywhere else on Earth, with maybe the exception of the deep ocean. So in 2 tablespoons, there are as many of soil, there are as many microbes as there are people on Earth. And there are as many species of microbes in that 2 tablespoons of soil as there are bird species on Earth. So these are tremendously diverse living ecosystems that affect plant productivity. They maintain crop and soil fertility. They're a rich source of antibiotics and other compounds, other therapeutic agents. There's a compound called rapamycin that has been linked to longevity in mammals. That's produced by a soil microbe. And of course, they balance these really critical nutrient cycles where specifically, the most important one that they balance is the carbon cycle. So they can sequester CO2 into the soil, or they can release carbon dioxide depending on their local environment. And there's a lot of research going into understanding what affects that across different areas of the world. And then if we go off of land and get in a boat and go out into the open ocean, and you take a deep breath, about half of the oxygen from that breath, every breath that you take, comes from phytoplankton that are out in the open ocean. So about half of the microbes, maybe a little bit less than half of the microbes in the ocean, take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and make new carbon out of that and release oxygen in the process, very much similar to what trees do. The rest of the microbes in the ocean help support that system by recycling other nutrients that those oxygen-producing microbes need in order to grow. So that's kind of we dabble a little bit in all of those things, believe it or not. So we're working on a project right now trying to understand how gut microbes may mitigate arsenic toxicity in hosts. There's a lot of arsenic exposure resulting from mining in Arizona. And some of that arsenic gets ingested by some of the populations that live near these mine sites. And we would like to understand it if the microbes in the gut, and we have a good idea that they are, actually other research shows that they are influencing the toxicity of that arsenic to the host. We also do work in soil, trying to understand how microbes in the desert survive very long periods of time without water. And we also are just really generally interested in marine microbiology. And one of the things I'm really interested in is how very slow growing microbes are able to persist for very long periods of time without a lot of food available to them.
Quite a giant field to study and to be doing research in. I think what you said at the very beginning about how, you know, a lot of people think that microbes are just germs that are there to infect us and cause disease. I think that's a really big misconception. Like you said, yes, there are microbes that do cause disease, but there are so many more microbes that are beneficial. And you're right, the microbiome is really trendy right now. Everybody wants to know what to do to get a good gut microbiome or, you know, reproductive microbiome. But I think not many people think about the microbes that are in the soil, or even, I didn't even know that the microbes in the ocean were so important to providing us the oxygen for the air that we breathe. So it's just really eye-opening to hear you give all of those examples and tell us how these microorganisms are essential to supporting so many aspects of our daily lives. So I want to talk a bit more about the makeup of your lab. So I know you're interested in training diverse scientists, and even just what you said earlier about being a first generation college student. I want to know why it's important to you to support diversity, and maybe even if you have, you know, first generation college students that you've supported, why that is important to you, and how do you, you know, achieve supporting diversity in STEM?
Yeah. You know, so I kind of alluded to this, well, we talked about it a little earlier. Microbiology has sort of been focused on pathogens for a very long time. Microbes that make us sick, basically, largely to the exclusion of other microbes just in that same ecosystem that make us healthy, and largely to the exclusion of all of the other microbial ecosystems that are around us. So it's kind of easy to understand how that could happen. If you have a lesion on your arm, you need to figure out what's causing it and how to take care of it so you can be healthy. So sort of analogously, STEM research has traditionally focused on issues that were deemed important by the people that were doing the research. And historically, and even today, that's enriched in white men and largely excludes the issues that are important to other groups, indigenous populations, Black or Hispanic groups. So sort of, I feel it's really critical to train those diverse scientists so they can occupy and lead those, be in those decision-making processes and make decisions that impact the communities that they live in, that they interact with, and affect change on as many groups as possible. The only way to really do that is to train those individuals in STEM and to be welcoming and supportive in the ways that they need to be welcomed and supported, which are going to be different than other populations. So our group is kind of, you know, I have influence over the way I run my lab group, and we've tried to put in systems that promote diversity in our lab group, starting from the moment we decide to hire someone and going all the way through when they leave the lab. I view that as sort of one continuum, starting with the decision to hire someone. These systems are meant to kind of minimize unconscious bias in the review and evaluation stages of hiring someone, acknowledging that there are different ways to be successful, and then creating structure around trying to identify those different ways and promoting them. So we do this throughout the whole lifeline. Every person kind of comes in to our lab group when they apply for that position at a certain point in their life. And we generally have no knowledge or understanding of what happened before that, both professionally or personally, to bring them to that point in their life. So everyone comes in with different perspectives and different life experiences. And we try to meet them where they're at and work together to have them grow and reach what their potential is at that point in their life, and reach higher heights of what they're potentially capable of doing. The way that I sort of internalize it is it's kind of like a sunrise and a sunset, where the sunrise is when we hire the person, they join our lab group, and then the sunset is when they leave our lab group, because most people are just temporary employees for us, or temporary, a student or a postdoc. Those are temporary positions. And while they're here, we want them to give their best and shine their light on the research projects that they do with us, and hopefully leave in a better place than they were when they started.
I love that philosophy of, really meeting someone where they're at and recognizing that to give these people, that might be of underrepresented backgrounds, opportunities. You not only have to have the opportunity to provide, but you also have to know that each person needs to be mentored differently, and has different ways that they learn best, or different things that they need to know and support to get them to that sunset, as you kind of mentioned. So I'm curious, I feel like, I know when I was in graduate school, they didn't really teach me or us how to mentor like that, or to bring in those different perspectives. So I'm curious if you have a mentor that really taught you how to value diversity and how to value these different perspectives.
No, I wouldn't say someone taught me how to do it. It's very much been sort of learning on the fly. When I started my own lab group, it's something that I've developed a real strong passion for. Here at University of Arizona, they have some training programs available that help us faculty learn how to mentor students from different backgrounds more effectively. That has been just immensely useful for me in sort of constructing my philosophy. And I think graduate students should be trained in mentorship. And I have a proposal out there right now that's in review that describes why I feel this way, and sort of one approach to training them. Graduate students often oversee undergraduate researchers, high school researchers, and then when they get their degree, they go on to positions that really have, mentorship-like or leadership-type roles in it. And that training would be critical to them making that transition and being successful. And it also sort of gets more mentorship-trained mentors into academia through those students if they decide to go into academia as well, to hopefully improve the overall mentorship sort of quality in academia as a whole.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think in graduate school, we do a really good job of learning how to do science and, how to write grants, write manuscripts, conduct experiments. But when a big part of your future job is mentoring and you don't have the foundation or the skills or the knowledge, that's a really big part of your skill set that you're missing. So I really do hope that your proposal gets accepted or funded, because I think some kind of training like that would be is essential and really missing. So
I think mentorship is the biggest part of this job. As a student or a postdoc, if I needed something done, I could just get it done, right? Go in the lab, spend some extra time doing it. That is not really feasible as a professor to put all that on your shoulders. You need other people, and you need to make sure you can not get the best out of them, but mentor them through the natural struggles that happen as you're learning things. And that's really difficult to do. So we have some structured frameworks where we, at regular intervals, review progress, long-term progress, career progress, and then we meet fairly regularly on short-term progress type things to make sure that everyone's on track and growing the way that they should be.
It's good to have those like incremental goals and check-ins, but then also looking at more long-term, having those bigger aspirations and seeing if you're on track with that. So yeah. I really like that model. I'm curious, obviously you're doing a lot of mentoring yourself, but do you still have mentors? Are there people that still help you and guide you along your career journey?
Oh yeah. I have what I call my publicly known mentors. These are the people that, I did my graduate work with, my postdoctoral work with, people that I work with now at the university. And then I have what I sort of consider my shadow mentors. These are people who have helped me throughout my career, or just even relatively recently. I don't officially have a paper or a publication or a collaboration with them, but they're people that I can bounce these ideas off of and some of these concerns off of, when I'm struggling, how do I deal with a certain situation? But yeah, absolutely. And I think the shadow mentors are probably the most valuable. These are people that, don't really have a vested interest in seeing me succeed, and they're out of their own kindness, giving their time and energy to helping my career. So that's something that I'd like to pay forward in the future. And I do, with several people right now, but I'd like to continue doing that.
Yeah, that's great. I've never heard of that term before, the kind of shadow mentor, but I like it. I like that concept. And you're right, it is important to kind of have that selfless mentor, to both have that yourself and to be able to give that back to other people, to just, create this culture of community and collaboration. So that's obviously really key at Bio 5, but I think it's important in no matter what career you're in. So I'm curious,
definitely agree.
Going back to research, what do you think has been your proudest scientific achievement so far?
Yeah, it's
probably hard to pick.
That's a tough one. So it's not that it's hard to pick, it's that I don't look back all that often. I kind of have my sight set on the next thing.
Yeah.
Science in our field gets stale pretty quickly. Methods develop extremely rapidly. And the things that I do today, or the projects I'm working on today, will kind of be comically out of date in 15 or 20 years. If I look back or read an old paper from the 90s or early 2000s, I kind of go like, holy cow, we were looking at that, in that way at that time. So I don't really have a favorite past one, but I'll say that the next one is the one that we'll be most proud of. And we have a really interesting project that our grad student Izzy Viney is working on, and about how soil microbes cope with extreme desiccation, like we find here in the Sonoran Desert. And I'm really excited about that paper, and hopefully in a few months we'll be able to share that with everybody.
That's fantastic. I'm really excited to hear about that and read that. But I like what you're talking. It almost made me think of a forward or a growth kind of mindset of just always keep moving forward instead of, looking back so much, and knowing that whatever's going to happen in the next 5, 10, 15 years is really going to help advance the field, because science does change so quickly, especially the technology. You're right. Yeah. Oh. So to wrap it up, I want to touch back on something that we talked about at the very beginning. So we talked about your love for car racing. So I'm interested in hearing some other interests or hobbies of yours that are not related to your research.
Yeah, so I still love cars. I still love auto racing. I love working on cars as long as it's not like an emergency and I'm short on time or something. But I do all of my own work maintaining the cars in our house. I can't remember the last time I brought a car in for something. So that's a great passion. I just love working with my hands. I do a little bit of woodworking as well. I really love music. I'm really love heavy metal in particular, and I like discovering new bands and new music, sort of getting back to this looking forward thing. Yeah. I have my favorites like Metallica or a band called Clutch. They're a little bit more senior, older bands, but there are a lot of newer bands. There's a local band that's relatively new called Gatecreeper. There's a band from New Zealand called Alien Weaponry. I really love their recent albums. I have kids. I love spending time with my kids outside, camping. We go up to the Oktoberfest on Mount Lemmon and have a good time up there every year. And, I enjoy working out. I work out in my garage in the summertime when it can get a little brutal, but there's a part of me that enjoys that, maybe a little too much when it's 92 degrees in here or something like that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That is so funny. I love all the different things or hobbies or activities that you are doing outside of work. I think it's really easy as a scientist, especially, for someone who's a PI and running a lab and mentoring, to get really, trapped at the university and, feeling like all you do is work. And so I think you're a great example of someone who has all of these different hobbies and passions and that aren't related to your research, and that you're, having a good work-life balance and spending time with your family and taking care of yourself physically and mentally. I just think that's so important no matter what stage of career you're in. So thank you for being a good example of that.
Yeah, that was largely learned during the pandemic too. I think that it was a real big struggle, not just for me, but for everybody the last year and a half. And I realized at some point, I couldn't put a pinpoint on it, that if I'm not starting to take care of myself, I'm not going to make it very far. It just wasn't possible. So I really had to put that energy on making sure that I was well, so I could provide for my lab group, for the research, for the university, and all of those things. So that's a relatively recent thing. I have been known to work and not have a great work-life balance, but over the last year and a half or 2 years, there's been a pretty good change, and I don't think I could go back to the way I was doing things before.
Yeah. Well, I think you make a good point about being the pandemic being a big wake-up call for a lot of us, and really reevaluating how we spend our time, where we spend it, and if the things we're doing are really giving life to us, or if they're kind of sucking it away from us. And so I think, I even know for myself, it's been good to reevaluate and to take more time to care for myself, because like you said, you have to be able to be well in yourself to be able to take care of all these other responsibilities, whether they are work related or even just family, to take care of your kids. And so, yeah, that's really important. It's unfortunate that it was a pandemic that took us to understand
exactly.
that.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm glad we all learned that lesson, hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Carini, for joining us today. I had a wonderful conversation about everything from, I'm still thinking about digging up chicken bones, to all of the microbes that live around us, and now to, finding more balance in our lives. So it's really been a great discussion.
Yeah, thanks so much for the invitation.
Yeah, of course. And thank you to our listeners for joining us for another episode of Science Talks. For more information, please visit our website at bio5.org. And from all of us at the Bio5 Institute, we will see you in the next episode.
Thanks to our listeners for tuning in to another episode of Science Talks. Continue the conversation with us next time as we learn more about the amazing science happening at the University of Arizona's Bio5 Institute.